Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking at something really fascinating and pretty controversial in fertility science, mitochondrial replacement therapy, or MRT.
That's right. We've gathered quite a bit of research on this.
We have, and it's not just about the science itself, but really the ethical storm that's brewing around potentially expanding its use.
Exactly. It's crucial, I think, to start with why MRT was developed in the first place. Its original purpose was very clear: to prevent the transmission of really serious mitochondrial DNA diseases.
These mtDNA diseases, right?
Yeah, they're devastating conditions affecting maybe 1 in 5,000 births, give or take. The early techniques like pronuclear transfer, that's where you swap the nuclease before fertilization, they've shown some promise.
Promise. How much promise?
Well, there are 8 reported healthy babies, which is encouraging. But, and this is a big but, we're really just at the beginning, long-term safety. That's absolutely not validated yet.
Okay, and that brings us to the core of today's discussion, doesn't it? The sources we're looking at focus on extending MRT beyond disease prevention.
Correct. Towards tackling age-related female infertility. Sometimes it's called euplasmic donation or transfer.
And using it for infertility, that changes the whole ethical game, doesn't it?
Fundamentally. You see, the demand for this kind of thing is growing, and it's really tied into broader social trends.
Like women having children later.
Precisely. You have highly educated women focusing on careers, maybe finding partners later in life. And biologically, as women age, the mitochondria in their eggs, think of them as the cell's battery packs, they start to degrade.
So the theory is swap out the old batteries for new ones.
Kind of, yeah. Replace those aging mitochondria with healthy ones from a donor, and maybe, just maybe, you restore the egg's ability to develop properly.
And the big draw here for these women is the chance to have a child who's still genetically theirs.
Right, exactly. It avoids using a conventional egg donor, which means the genetic line from the mother continues.
So you've got this really powerful desire for a biological child clashing with, well, potentially significant unknown medical risks. Let's try and unpack that tension.
Okay, so when you look at the arguments for expanding MRT, the proponents really lean heavily on the right to reproductive autonomy.
A patient's choice.
Yes, they frame pursuing a genetically related child, even via this complex technology, as a basic expression of personal freedom.
And you can't underestimate how strong that desire for a genetic link is. The sources really hammer this home.
Oh, absolutely.
That idea of ties of blood, it still carries so much weight in society, culturally and even legally.
Yeah.
Remember that IVF mix-up case in Singapore?
I do, yes.
It really highlighted how much value we place on that ordinariness, that expectation of natural genetic parenthood.
It's true. And for many individuals, that genetic connection is deeply interwoven with their sense of identity, how they see themselves.
Wanting to see yourself reflected in your child.
Yes, or seeing the child as a physical representation of the parental bond. It helps explain why options like adoption or standard egg donation, while wonderful for many, just don't satisfy that specific yearning for genetic creation for some people. They often see it as a last resort.
And the arguments go even further, touching on justice, access. The WHO even calls infertility a disability.
That's right, which brings up the idea of a right to treatment. Plus, you have cultural or religious traditions that really emphasize lineage.
Like Islamic law.
Yes, Hifz al-Nasl, the principle of preserving lineage, is important in Islamic Sharia law. So introducing a third person's mitochondrial DNA is, well, it's complicated and viewed very differently by various scholars.
Okay, so we have this profound desire backed by autonomy arguments, cultural weight, but then there's the science. How do we balance that desire against the actual medical risks and limitations?
And that is the critical pivot, because the stark medical reality is that MRT, when used as euplasmic donation for older women, does not fix the main reason their eggs struggle.
Which is?
Chromosomal errors and haploidy. That's the big one in older eggs.
Wait a second. So if the chromosomes, the actual genetic blueprint, are often scrambled in older eggs, what good does replacing the mitochondria, the power source, actually do? Is it just masking the real problem?
That's the concern raised in the sources, yes. The data we have is pretty sobering. One key pilot study, using a technique called maternal spindle transfer, found aneuploidy in almost 55% of the resulting embryos.
Over half were abnormal.
Over half. So claiming MRT is a fix for general age-related infertility seems, well, premature at best, possibly even misleading based on this.
And what about safety for the children who are born, even in the disease prevention cases? You mentioned 8 healthy babies earlier.
Encouraging, yes, but not without footnotes. 3 of those 8 babies in that UK study had some early health issues, noted things like brief startling episodes, a heart rhythm issue, high lipids.
Were those definitely caused by the MRT?
They haven't proven a direct causal link, no, but it absolutely flags the need for very careful long-term monitoring. Plus, there's always the theoretical risk of incompatibility between the mother's nuclear DNA and the donor's mitochondrial DNA. We just don't know the long-term effects.
So zooming out, the core ethical question becomes, does a parent's desire and autonomy justify imposing these unknown, potentially serious, and possibly transgenerational risks on a child?
Exactly. Because mtDNA is passed down the maternal line, any problems could affect daughters, granddaughters, and so on. Many ethicists argue the future child's welfare has to take precedence here, especially with so many unknowns.
Which naturally leads to the whole three-parent baby identity issue. How might being conceived from 3 people's genetic material affect someone psychologically? This idea of genealogical bewilderment.
It's a fascinating debate. On one side, some experts point out the mitochondrial DNA is a tiny fraction less than 0.1% of the total genetic code.
So they argue it's biologically insignificant for identity.
Essentially, yes. That it doesn't really change who the biological parents are in a meaningful way.
But if it's less than 0.1%, why is there even a debate? Why would it matter?
Because others argue that even that tiny bit is fundamental for cell function, and it does alter the child's unique genetic makeup. They aren't solely the genetic product of the mother and father in the traditional sense. And the psychological weight of knowing that, well, that depends hugely on culture, family, personal feelings. It's not purely scientific.
Okay, and that identity piece connects directly to the practicalities, the economics of it all.
Right.
Because if MRT becomes common for infertility, you suddenly need a lot more egg donors.
A whole lot more. And it changes who those donors might be.
How so?
With conventional egg donation, recipients often look for donors with specific traits, race, maybe education level, physical appearance. But mitochondrial DNA doesn't code for those things.
Ah, so the donor's physical traits or background become irrelevant.
Largely irrelevant for the mitochondria itself, yes.
Right.
This potentially opens the door to a much wider pool of donors.
Which sounds good, but the sources warn about exploitation, right?
Exactly. The concern is that women from more vulnerable groups, lower socioeconomic backgrounds perhaps, who might have been overlooked before, could now be targeted more aggressively.
Because their mitochondria are just as good as anyone else's, regardless of their life circumstances.
Precisely. And they might be more susceptible to financial incentives.
And this leads to a really disturbing possibility mentioned in the research.
Yes, the idea of reproductive colonialism or fertility colonialism. The worry is that wealthy countries or individuals might start sourcing egg donors predominantly from poorer nations.
Creating a global market based on potential exploitation.
It raises huge red flags about justice and fairness, especially if regulations aren't tight and globally coordinated.
Which underscores the need for incredibly careful counseling for the women considering this, especially those who faced multiple failed IVF cycles.
Absolutely critical. They need to be told very clearly that the success rates for age-related infertility using MRT might actually be lower than with conventional egg donation using younger eggs.
And the costs could pile up with multiple attempts.
Yes, that needs to be transparent. Hope can be blinding and vulnerability can be exploited.
And we already see different countries taking different approaches to regulation, which must complicate things.
Immensely. Look at the UK versus Australia. The UK allows mitochondrial donors to remain anonymous.
But Australia's
MitoHope program, under Maeve's law, mandates that the donor must be identifiable.
So completely different approaches to the child's right to know their origins, and that must affect who's willing to donate. Right.
Undoubtedly. It creates a real mismatch and potential challenges for sourcing donors and for the future children.
So pulling this together, what are the policy recommendations coming out of this research?
The strong consensus is keep MRT for infertility strictly within research trials for now. We need that long-term safety data first.
Before unleashing it clinically.
Definitely. And regulations have to demand comprehensive mandatory counseling for patients. Plus, really strict rules on advertising to stop clinics from overpromising.
No miracle cure narratives.
Yeah. Exactly. Transparency is key. And we need robust oversight on how eggs are procured.
To prevent conflicts of interest.
Yes. For instance, clinics shouldn't be able to pressure women who previously froze their own eggs, maybe women feeling financial strain, to donate those eggs back for MRT use, perhaps in exchange for a refund. That's ethically fraught.
Looking down the road, Is there anything else on the horizon that might avoid some of these issues?
There is one technology, though it's still very early stage, in vitro gametogenesis, or IVG.
IVG, what's that?
The idea is to create eggs or sperm in the lab directly from a person's ordinary body cells, like skin cells.
Create eggs from skin cells. Seriously.
That's the concept. If it works, it's incredibly compelling,
Why?
because you could potentially create healthy young eggs genetically matched to the woman. This could bypass the aneuploidy problem of older eggs and completely eliminate the need for an egg donor.
So no donor exploitation risk, no three-parent issue.
Theoretically, yes, it could solve a lot of the medical and ethical problems we've been discussing.
That sounds almost too good to be true. The real holy grail of fertility treatment.
It could be, but, and it's a significant but, we need to manage expectations. IVG is really just beginning. It's only worked in mice so far.
Not quite ready for prime time then.
Not even close. And even when or if it becomes viable for humans, it's likely to be incredibly expensive at first.
Raising whole new questions about access and equity.
Exactly. So it's promising, but it's a long-term prospect with its own ethical hurdles down the line.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we keep coming back to that fundamental conflict.
We do. It's this incredibly powerful, very human desire for a genetically related child.
Clashing head-on with a technology that carries significant unknowns and, critically, doesn't actually fix the core biological issue for age-related infertility.
And the potential for global exploitation, if we don't get the regulations right, really demands a coordinated international ethical framework. We can't have wealthier nations just outsourcing the risks.
So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway?
Well, the science is amazing. The potential to help some families is profound. But the evidence we have strongly suggests that for age-related infertility, the unknown risks, especially transgenerational ones, probably outweigh the benefit of parental autonomy right now.
At least until safety is much better understood.
Precisely. The child's welfare has to be paramount.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider.
Given that the well-being of future generations is so crucial here, should society be focusing its research funding and efforts more on potentially safer, maybe ultimately more effective technologies like IVG, which avoids donor eggs altogether?
Or should we continue investing heavily in expanding MRT for infertility, knowing it might not even solve the underlying aneuploidy problem and carries all these complex ethical risks?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.